Imagine with me for a second. In a few months, COVID-19 risk finally dies down and you get to go jam with your friends again. That is, until COVID-20 hits. What? Not exactly the sequel anybody asked for. You get to your friend's house and you're jamming. He calls another tune. He says it's in F Lydian. What? Why is there a Greek word like Lydian in my music? I didn't sign up for this and it sucks. Well, it's a mode, and that's what we're here to talk about today. I'm a teacher, and I'm also a working musician, and I find hands down, modes are one of the most confusing topics for students and even for teachers. Firstly, I'm going to teach you the two main pathways you need to keep separate and understand so you can know any mode in any key. Secondly, I'm going to be teaching you the 6 main errors that all musicians run into when they learn modes. And if you can avoid these, you'll avoid a whole bunch of headache too. The third thing is I'm going to be teaching you hands down the best way to practice modes to get them in your fingers, your ears, and also in your mind. Free PDF in the description if you want some specific diagrams and formula and understanding of the way that I think. Error number 1 before we even start. Do you know your major and your minor scales? 60 to 70% of my students do not understand modes because they have not done the homework on major and minor scales. If that's you, it's gonna save you a whole bunch of headache if you go ahead and study those now. All right, let's get right to it. So I like to define modes very simply. A mode is a different perspective on a pre-existing scale, and this different perspective changes the mood of the scale. Let me give you an example. I'm gonna play C major, or C Ionian. Very simple lick, right? C, D, E, F, G, F, E. And then I'm gonna play it in D Dorian. So why is it that I played the same exact thing, but it's supposedly a different mode? That makes no sense. There are 2 mindsets that you need to understand so that you can dissect what I just did. And this is error number 2. If you mix up these 2 mindsets, it's gonna make it pretty difficult to grasp modes. So the first path to understanding modes is the relative pathway, or same pitches, different center pathway. Basically what I'm doing here is I'm relating any mode that I need to find to a parent major scale. The reason why it's called a parent is because it has the same exact pitches, and that can help me find out what the notes of the mode are. If you've heard of the word relative, as in relative major and relative minor, you're in luck, because that concept is going to make this a whole lot easier. It's the exact same thing. Well, if any of those phrases sounded confusing to you, have no fear, because help is on the way. For a second, I want you to imagine the solar system. This is going to make sense in a bit, I promise, okay? Now, second thing I want you to imagine is I want you to imagine that you are standing on the sun. It's kind of hot. Wouldn't recommend. What would the rest of the solar system look like from the vantage point of the sun? I think it would look like you on the sun, and then looking around you would see all the planets orbiting you in a circle from all directions. Why is that? We know that the sun has a gravitational pull. It's also why we label the sun as the center of the solar system. It's the same deal with scales. When we're talking about a pitch collection like C major, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, no sharps or flats, the C tends to be the center of gravity. Why? Well, partially, I think all the half steps tend to lead to chord tones of the one chord, C, E, G, or C major. In addition to that, if I just kind of noodle around for a little bit, it wants to land on the E, the G, or the C. So, you notice I land on this F and it's like, there you go. It relaxes, it resolves from tension to release. Just like the sun, the root and the one chord has a certain gravitational pull to it. And that's why we label it, just like the sun is the center of the solar system, we label it C major. And as a result of this, we end up with a particular intervallic structure. What do I mean by that? I mean whole steps and half steps. C to D is a whole, D to E is a whole, half, whole, 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 half. That's what gives the major scale its unique sound, right? Its unique mood. There's a major third and a major 7 that really, this major 7 wants to go here and this F really wants to go down to the third, to the E. Now, going back to the solar system, I want you to imagine What if you were standing not on the sun, but on Pluto? Is it a planet? It's a planet in my heart, okay? So Pluto's a planet and you're standing on it. What would the universe look like from the perspective of Pluto? It would look a lot like it does in real life. It doesn't revolve around you. If you look at it, it would look like Pluto's here and all the planets are revolving in this direction. You would kind of be off to the side. Similarly, whenever I'm pivoting modes using the relative pathway, what's happening is I'm changing my perspective on the other planets or on the parent scale, which creates a whole different view and a whole different sequence of half and whole steps. What do I mean by this? For example, if I look at C major, and I play that lick from earlier, you notice that it resolves. It resolves at that E. Now if I play with a D underneath, it's still pretty tense, you hear that? That's because I have changed the focal center. Now I am not on the sun, I'm on Pluto. I'm not on the C, I'm on D. And that changes the whole steps and the half steps. Instead of it being a major third, it's a minor third now. There's that kind of angular, kind of floaty natural 6 or 13. And there's a flat 7. Completely different structure just by pivoting what the focal center is. Now, interesting thing to watch out for here. You can't move the planets around, right? Unless...
Maybe I could move the Earth out of the way. If we had a week, I couldn't list all the reasons that won't work.
Same idea here. If you're pivoting with the relative method, the pitches should not change. If they do change, there's a problem. You gotta take a step back here. C major and D Dorian have the same pitches. Okay, that's one thing you can look out for to catch your mistakes. Now let's demonstrate F Lydian. I'm gonna improvise a little bit, and I'm gonna put an F in the bottom. You notice that I didn't start on F and I didn't end on F, but it still sounded like F Lydian. This is error number 3, huge error everybody runs into when thinking about modes. A lot of people think that modes are defined by what pitch you start on and what pitch you end on. Now that's not really true at all. As a result of this, people practice modes just by running scales up and down. And that's great for your muscle memory, but it's not going to help your musicianship at all whatsoever. It does not matter what note you start on or end on. What really matters when it comes to modes is which is the focal pitch, which is the center of gravity. In most cases, the drone or the chord's going to tell you. I had that F in the bottom, so that was telling your ear that we are in F something, and then C major dictated it needed to be Lydian because of that B natural. Otherwise, now there's going to be no drone, and I'm still going to make it sound like Lydian. How? I'm going to center around triads of F major. You see that? I'm implying that center of gravity not by a drone, but just by the notes that I'm emphasizing. We only really practice modes from the focal pitch to remember which one the focal pitch is. But nobody improvises with major and says, oh, if it's in C major, I need to start on C. If we did that, everything would be boring and it would suck. That's why you have to keep this in mind. It's a good thing to practice maybe, to start on F and end on F. It might help your ear, but do not let it become a musical rule. That's going to really cripple your musicianship moving forward. Again, the point of modes is not where the note starts and where it ends, but it's a different mood, creating a different intervallic structure with that different perspective. Alright, Nico, you might be asking, these concepts are cool, but how do we practice them? Here's a method that fits perfectly. Pick a scale, any parent major scale. Let's pick C because we've been using it and it's easy. C Ionian or C major. Put a backing track that implies C major, or just use a drone with your looper or something. You know, on YouTube you can find these 4-minute tracks of just a cello playing one note. And it's beautiful. It sounds great, and it's awesome to use for improvisation and modes practice. Okay, random plug, I'm not sponsored or anything. I'm a new YouTuber, right? Anyway, C Ionian. Listen to the tension and the resolve in each note. That sounds pretty good because that's the third. Once I hit that fourth, that does not want to stay there. It wants to go here or here, right? So that F is a tense note in C Ionian. Now I'm going to pivot to D Dorian, and now that F is pleasant because it's the third now. It's the minor third. And that B is one of my favorite Dorian notes. It's kind of the angular, floaty 13 I mentioned earlier. And now let's go to Phrygian. And this is, I want to make a point here. Obviously you would continue for C Ionian, D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, A Aeolian, B Locrian. But I want to pause on E Phrygian to make an important point. You notice that that is not consonant at all? That is super dissonant. It really wants to go here. There. It's like a sigh of relief, right? But that's C. C was actually extremely relaxed in C major and D Dorian. So why is it that in E Phrygian, it's just tense, right? Here's error number 4. People treat all of these modes as if they're playing over the parent major. I get a lot of students who ask this, and I believed this for many years too. If F Lydian is the same as C major, can't I just play the same licks? The answer is no. Even if it's the same pitch collection, as we've demonstrated, the notes behave completely differently. What might be tense in one mode is completely resolved in another. If I'm playing an F Lydian, I'm happy on that F. Now, if I go to C major, that's not pleasant at all. Kind of like playing over chords. As the chords pivot, it's similar with modes. You need to adapt to which notes are consonant and which notes are dissonant. The way to avoid error number 3, by the way, is what I said earlier. Go one note at a time and focus on the feeling of each note. Listen to songs or phrases in certain modes. You can look it up, like songs in Dorian. And notice what notes they're landing on and which notes they're just kind of skimming past. You need to understand the dynamics of tension and resolve within these modes and not just play, quote unquote, the right set of notes. Because there's a difference between playing the right set of notes and playing notes that sound good. And there's a difference between that and making music, right? And that's going to take development and patience with your ear. As your perspective has changed between different modes, your ear and your fingers must also respond differently. The second pathway now to understand modes is the parallel pathway, or different pitches, same center. Opposite of the relative pathway that we just talked about. This is the slightly more straight edge way to learn modes. It's more difficult, but you'll be able to pivot into modes much quicker. And let's have a demonstration just like before. Imagine for a second that you're sitting in the middle of your room and you don't like the way your furniture is arranged. I imagine you've all felt this way because we've been stuck inside for a few months. You ask a friend or your mom or your brother to help you readjust things. Though your position has not changed, all of your furniture and the symmetry of your room has completely changed relative to your static position. Similarly, the parallel method modifies the pitches around a single note. Again, the single note, the focal pitch, the center of gravity, will not change. I said we couldn't move the planets, but we're going to for this method. The sun will stay the same and all the planets will be shifting accordingly. Demonstration. I can pivot between F major and F Lydian. How do I know which note to change? Well, the formula is in the free PDF in the description if you haven't gotten it already. But I see there that compared to F major, F Lydian has a sharp 4. And that's always going to be the case. So if I look at this, I notice that the fourth note is a B flat. To change that, I need to make it a B natural. it completely changes the curve and the arc of the scale. Whereas before major is just kind of static, it resolves kind of within itself. Lydian kind of just keeps going and it keeps rising up. It doesn't really resolve, it just has this upward trajectory. So as we can see, F major, F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F is now F, G, A, B natural, C, D, E, F, thus creating F Lydian. Parallel method. We have not changed the root, we're changing the notes around it. Error number 5, really quick guys. Many think that accidentals mean sharped. You notice that I use the word, well, I hope I used the word raised. If I didn't use the word raised. Notice that if I were to sharp B, if I were to think sharp B, what would happen is I would get a B sharp, so I would kind of get another C natural, which doesn't make sense. I need a B natural. And so don't think about accidentals, is the general musical rule. Don't think about accidentals as sharped or flatted. Think about them as raising or lowering a pitch. Trust me, this is gonna save you so many headaches. I've had so many headaches because I didn't really grasp this concept. I'm all about avoiding headaches, so, you know. We can do this alteration method with any mode. F Dorian. Basically E flat major. Again, I ask myself, Dorian, which notes are modified? Flat 3, natural 6 still, and flat 7. And that's how I've modified it from F something to F another mode. Notice that with no accidentals though, going back to F Lydian, what key signature has no accidentals? C major does. As you can see, we have arrived at the same place that we did when we took the relative pathway. In the relative pathway, we went to C major first. In the parallel pathway, we have modified the F major scale to get to F Lydian. 2 pathways to land you in the same place. As a side note, guys, personally when using the second pathway, the parallel pathway, I like to categorize modes from the brightest to the darkest. There are a few YouTube videos about this. It categorizes modes by their mood. So for example, Lydian is pretty bright, major is a little bit darker, Mixolydian is next. I'm progressively flattening notes. Now, the order is in that free PDF. I keep talking about this PDF. It's free though, so you're welcome, right? Just want to help out. So this is helpful with memorizing the alterations in a practical way and like kind of making musical decisions with your ear. Do I want it to sound dark? I probably won't pick Lydian, right? I'll probably pick Phrygian or something because it has that darker kind of sound compared to the sharper, brighter, kind of ascending Lydian sound. Okay, how do you practice the parallel method? Here's what you do. Pick a single root and then start by playing Ionian. Let's start with C again, because again, we've been using it and we like it because it's easy. C major. And then I'm gonna alter it to form the 7 modes. For example, Lydian. What would Lydian be? Sharp 4. C, D, E, F sharp. Raised. Not sharped, raised. Avoid that error. What would Mixolydian sound like? Oh, it's probably a flat 7. C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat, C. And see how they sound completely different? Then Mixolydian. Mixolydian to me is like very heroic sounding. Compare how these notes sound and notice that the root does not change, but everything else is changing. All right, here we are. At the very end, here is the best practice method to grasp both
pathways.
It isn't good to rely solely on either
Pathway.
Rather, understand how they interact, and that's what this
Practice method
is going to teach you. You're going to take both pathways to one destination. Let's do something more difficult because it'll be fun. Let's do B flat Phrygian. Okay, let's do B flat Phrygian. Step 1, relative pathway. Pathway 1. What mode is Phrygian? Let's find the parent major. Phrygian is the third mode, so I'm going to count backwards from B flat to get to whatever the root is. Here's where you need to factor in the key signature. You can't just go B flat A G. You kind of have to go within the intervals. So go down 2 whole steps or 4 half steps. You'll end up at G flat. So then we know that G flat is the parent major scale. So take your G flat parent major scale, G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat, D flat, E flat, F, G flat. Beautiful. Beautiful accidentals. Gnarly. Let's do something more difficult because it'll be fun.
It was not fun.
And then let's hear what it sounds like over a B flat. There you go. I have arrived at B flat Phrygian. We've made it to B flat Phrygian using the relative pathway. Now we're going to use the parallel pathway for step 2 and see if our work is correct. We're not basing it off of G flat major, no parent major. We are referring to just B flat major and we're going to modify it. B flat, C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B flat. How are we going to modify this? According to that free PDF that I've been plugging for the past, I don't know how long this video is going to end up, 30 minutes, maybe. According to that PDF anyway, there's going to be a lowered, I remembered, a lowered 2, a lowered 3, a 4, 5, lowered 6, lowered 7, and 1. So, B flat, C flat, D flat, E flat, F, G flat, A flat, B flat. Now you notice it has all the same flats as G flat major. So, if you've been following along, then congratulations. Both of your pathways work. And so, checking yourself with both of these pathways, it does
4
two things. First of all, you're self-correcting. You're not wasting the time like, oh, I thought that this was the mode, but now it's not, and so I've learned Lydian wrong. You're going to avoid that with this practice method. Secondly, you're breaking free of formulas. One thing you don't want to do at a gig is be like crunching numbers to the side, trying to figure out what mode you want to use. You want to practice like a nerd so you don't play like a nerd on the gig. And the way you do that is you have this stuff so automatic that you don't even need to think about it, like analyzing it. You can just think about what mood do I want, what mode do I need, let's go. And that's what this practice method does for you. Third, in a situation like that gig I was saying, or that jam from the intro, when you need to figure out what mode something is, and you need to figure out what the pitches are, sometimes one will be slower and one will be faster. For example, if I asked you to find B Locrian, you could find B major and then flat everything.
Lower.
Or you could just realize that B Locrian is the same as C major. Now, you wouldn't play it like C major, but the point is you arrive at those pitches much faster than doing all of those calculations. And fourth, it just reinforces your major scale knowledge. Why not, right? Step 3 of this ultimate practice method. First step to review, relative pathway. Second, parallel pathway. Third step, let's get your ear familiar. Improvise a little bit in B flat Phrygian. Get the sound of that mode in your head. Tense. Resolved. Super tense. Super tense and super Spanish. Do not just run G flat major up and down. Do not just run G flat major from B flat to B flat up and down. Go slowly and again actually hear which notes are tense and which notes are resolved. Here's the final error, error number 6, and this is more of a musical problem than it is like a technical theory problem. A lot of people think that soloing over modal progressions is easy, but error number 6 is not engaging your musicality and getting lazy. For example, here's the best example actually. Every beginner jazz musician gets So What by Miles Davis as like the beginner tune. Because it's like theoretically easy, right? you just play D Dorian or C major for the A and B section. In the bridge, you just move up a half step. And then you move back down. Now that sounds kind of boring, doesn't it? Well, it is boring. And here's why. Modal progressions use a different kind of musical engine than other songs. Maybe it doesn't have the rhythmic sophistication or like the bebop chord progressions, but it's using a different kind of engine, which is a static chord progression, and it's really the interest of the ideas that you play over the top of it. And so if you get lazy, what you'll find is modal progressions are just as hard, if not like technically difficult, then like interpretively difficult. This is a bit of a wake-up call for a lot of musicians. Like the first time I played So What, I was like, oh shoot, my ideas kind of suck, huh? And that's okay. Like sometimes you just need to have that realization so that you know that you have to strengthen that muscle of your motivic development, whether it's using tension and resolve to build the solo to a climax. It could be a lot of different things. And again, more specific videos on this are coming soon. But for now, I will just say, don't be lazy just because the scale is not shifting. Okay? Great. Bonus step 4. I would repeat that process in one of two ways. You've gotten to your destination B-flat Phrygian via both pathways. Now, you can pick a pathway and go somewhere else. What do I mean by that? Relative. Let's take the relative pathway first. I would take then G-flat major and pivot between all of the relative modes within that same set of pitches. So like B-flat is the Phrygian, but also G-flat, right? And A-flat Dorian. Snuck a little blues in there. And then C-flat Lydian, or it's B. So that's one pathway you can take away from B-flat Phrygian. You can also take the parallel pathway away from B-flat Phrygian by pivoting all of the rest of the notes but keeping B-flat the same. So B-flat Phrygian is going to sound a lot different than B-flat Lydian. Right? And so you're doing many different things by pivoting in to a mode with two pathways and then pivoting out of a mode with two pathways. And again, practice like a nerd so you don't play like a nerd. That's the saying that I like to use. Eventually your brain will start making other connections. Before you know it, you'll be really familiar. And back to that jam session, F Lydian won't sound so strange anymore. Congratulations, you've made it to the end of the video. Let's recap. The two main pathways are firstly, relative method. The relative method is I keep all of the pitches the same, but I just change which one is the center of the scale, the focal point, or the center of gravity. The second is the parallel method, as I'm keeping the focal pitch the same, and I'm just changing where the other pitches are in relation intervallically. Now, there are 6 errors. The first error is not knowing your major and minor scales. The second, confusing relative and parallel. The third, thinking it's all about the start and the end pitch. The fourth is treating it the same as the parent major. Fifth is confusing sharped and flattened with raised and lowered. And the sixth, not keeping it musical. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I wish I had this information when I was a new musician. If you feel like this was helpful for you, like and subscribe, and then hit that notification button, as the YouTubers say. That way, you can see the next videos when they pop up. And in the comments, leave your thoughts, what you thought about this video, what you would like to see in the future, and we can interact, we can talk, I can answer your questions there as well. So, that's all I've got, and happy practicing. Take care.